Hello, welcome back to the Masterclass, the Manchester United Tactical Podcast. I'm your host, Haider Rubbani, and Manchester United have just won 3-1. Today was all about the 3 points, Rob. What do you think of it? The first half was a little bit, it was poor for my liking, but we got the result at the end of the day, and that's the most important thing. After Liverpool have dropped points, Spurs have dropped points, amongst other sides, City and Leicester winning, so we really needed to win to keep ourselves in that race, didn't we?
25 games in now, all that matters is winning. It doesn't matter how good you are. It's about winning. Now, of course, we like to break down a performance here. We look at the tactics. We kind of give it a whole overview. But ultimately, at this time, part of the season, this is just about winning games now. Yeah. And I think today, Manchester United, it was a really poor first half. There were reasons for that, and they couldn't really get the game together. A really bad goal to give away as well to what is effectively a poor team in Newcastle. But I was impressed in the second half of how United took at least control of the match and their own destiny. And I think when you get to the last 5 or 10 minutes of the game and you're strolling it out and you're 3-1 up and you could score maybe a fourth and even a fifth and go on, then that's a good position to be in. It's certainly nothing to panic about.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the comment here saying great to get the win, but not the prettiest game. Same problems. Looking forward to breaking it down. That's what we're here for, guys. Thank you for joining us. Rob, let's be completely frank here. You know, this is not a game that we're going to remember in years gone by. But what is positive, and we spoke off air about this, is that when Manchester United in the last few years would not have won that game, going 1-0 down, they would have struggled, they would have huffed and puffed. But today they got the result. There's a good resolve in the squad. There's good character. And in the end, it was pretty comfortable, wasn't it?
It was, and I think you saw in that first half, and I said, well, we'll talk about the goals, because I think the Newcastle goal is quite important to highlight. After what was effectively a poor first 45 minutes, they went in the dressing room with their manager and the coaches, and they worked it out. And they came out in the second half. And yeah, it was an ugly win. But you know what? Ugly wins are just as valuable as classic victories. It's 3 points at the end of the day. That's all that really matters in the stats. I think overall as well with this game, you know, when you look at the attack, you look at the balance, selection wasn't particularly controversial again. And we will talk about him a lot, but I think United really missed Scott McTominay today. You know, I talk about the double pivot a lot and its function and how it works and how it should work, and that you don't always need creativity from that two that sits in front of the back four, but you need energy. And I think in the first half, United didn't have the energy really to meet Newcastle's challenge. And that's not great when you're playing a team who are just outside the relegation places. You really want to kind of outwork them and outplay them. So I think that was kind of a real highlighting point tactically and with the selection today, that with Scott McTominay, he's becoming a more and more important player for this Manchester United team week by week.
You're spot on about McTominay. It's quite funny because, you know, I thought his injury would be missed by the team, but I didn't expect to see this much of a drop-off. I mean, look, we know what Nemanja Matic can bring. We know what Nemanja Matic did bring last season, but he's not showing that, Rob, at all. First half, he struggled. Second half, I mean, he was much better. He was getting forward. I think one of United's biggest problems today was that the passing from deep was poor today. Not enough penetration. No one breaking the lines, especially in that first half. You know, I thought Dan James did well. He was holding his width. You know, no one was looking to stretch the play out to him. But second half, what we did see from Matic is he got forward. I mean, he pretty much made the assist. I know Bruno got given it, which helps our fantasy points. He got a little toe on it. But Matic got forward and passed the ball out wide. And that's something McTominay's been doing a lot the last month or so, I would say. He's had a good season, but he's getting forward a lot more. He's really now made himself almost a shoe-in to start, isn't he, for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side now?
I think so. And I think it's also about personnel and partnerships. And that's why I say McFred is my number one starting partnership in the pivot. Not because McTominay and Fred are the most gifted, blessed footballers at Manchester United. It's because they get the job done and they work. So I didn't think Fred was particularly good today, but I think he suffers next to Matic. Not great chemistry, bit more difficult in terms of where they pick up the ball and how they progress it. I don't think passing from deep is too much of an issue. I think when you play 4-2-3-1, the idea is to get the ball to maybe the attackers who are wider to their feet, and you can run at the defence and maybe then slip in the centre forward, that is. And United did that more in the second half. You know, the big thing was getting the ball to Bruno and allowing him to operate more in the pocket. And it meant that United kind of just went up the pitch another 15 or 20 yards. And as you said there, Matic, second half. First half, Matic looked like normal Matic. Very, very deep, quite stationary in that screening role, which in a 4-2-3-1 is not that helpful because you need people to be able to progress. And what McTominay's been able to do in the last few weeks, and we've seen it over and over again, is that he's actually more of a box-to-box player. So he'll get the ball, he won't just drive it, but he'll make second man runs. And if you can be the double pivot and the defensive function, but also be a second man runner, you become very, very valuable for a team that can counter attack, but also a team that likes to score goals. Today was the 16th time this season Manchester United have scored 3 goals or more. That's a very, very good statistic for a club who want to go up and become title challengers eventually.
Agreed, but I also want to point out as well, we went behind. Oh, no, we didn't go behind today. Forget about that, Rob. I thought we went behind. It felt like we went behind. We didn't go behind. We went level. So scrap that point. Rob, I do want to talk about, there's a couple of questions or comments here about the Thursday, Sunday turnaround. And you hear this, it's kind of a bit like a narrative, isn't it? That when you play in the Europa League, suddenly that Thursday, Sunday turnaround is harder. Teams get more tired. You can't compete for a title. Or it really does affect your league campaign. United started slow again. The first 20-25 minutes, Rob, was almost pedestrian pace. United couldn't get a foot on the ball. They had no rhythm. Is it fair to say that this Thursday, Sunday thing did have a mental impact? Because it's not the first time United have started slowly this season. And it is a bit of a concern because, out the blocks, we are very slow. After halftime, again, we are slow. It takes us time to get into it. We seem to finish stronger in both halves. Is it something that you're concerned about? Because it's something that I do think, why is the reason why United are starting slowly? Are they just not at the races to get going? It's something that is quite frustrating.
It's not a Thursday, Sunday thing for me, because that would kind of imply that playing on Thursday is an issue and then you play at the weekend. The issue is playing Europe, Premier League, Europe, Premier League, Europe, Premier League. They're not just two different competitions. They're almost like two different worlds, in terms of what you have to do to win those games and how you approach them. Now, of course, the training is the same. The tactical setups are all exactly the same. What is different is just the turnaround in times to recover. So you see that this Manchester United team now, after playing lots of games this season in quick succession, European matches followed by Premier League matches, they're just knackered. We've talked about Scott McTominay there briefly. Scott is the engine of this team at the moment. Scott's the guy that will go the extra mile. Now, I think that's also why you saw Dan James start today. I think Dan, again, had another good game. You see the energy that he can inject. He's not the most talented player. He can go round players because he's quick. He's not a kind of tricky 1 or 2 touch player. He's just going to give you what he gives. And he's certainly gone up a level in the last 6 months and warrants a start. But it's difficult. It's difficult for any of the teams in the Champions League or in the Europa League. You always see it. You play on a Wednesday in the Champions League and you play well. And then you play on the Saturday or the Sunday, and what happens? You lose. It happens so often. It's what happens generally with teams when they are just fatigued. I'm not overly worried about it. To me, Europa League is important, but not as important as the Premier League. You make that kind of distinction. And I think today, United, what you have to do is just get over the line. It doesn't matter if you have one half that's not particularly good. Make sure you're better in the second half. Make sure those 3 points are in your pocket and away, and you go on to the next match.
Yeah, spot on, Rob. I just want to add as well about Dan James. I questioned why he was starting. I looked at it and I thought, right, well, Newcastle most likely to play a low block, and James was fantastic, obviously midweek, but we played counter-attacking. There was space behind, so my reasoning was sort of, James would be there. He'd stretch the defense. Sort of because Martial likes to drop deep. Having James making those runs, holding his width would be beneficial. And to be honest with you, I wasn't too sure about it, but we've got to give him credit. That's now 2 games in 2 goals in 2 games. I believe that's 6 in 9 they were saying from games that he's played, on BT, which is actually a very, very good return. You've talked a lot, haven't you, about the fact that he's training really hard, that he's working really well in training. Ollie's very impressed with what he's seeing. He's definitely improved, hasn't he? He's gone up a level. He's not perhaps you couldn't say he's a solution to the right wing problem, but you can't complain. He's been asked to play and he's performed, and he has something, like we said last week, he has something that he can offer. He's something different. He's going to offer his pace. He can get behind. I thought he played well today.
He's been at United now, is it 2 years, isn't it, overall? And of course, what do you do in that 2 years when you're not playing? Well, you train. You train with the first team. You work around it. And what you have to do is find your unique selling point. So Dan James, as I just said, there is never going to be a kind of player who's going to have mazy runs and kind of incredible moments of skill, but he is quick. And he's learned that when he's out of possession, he needs to go and close down quickly. He needs to provide energy. And when he's in the channel or on the outside of the fullback, he has got to run and get to the byline. Now, he did that today. I thought the goal was really good because he intelligently stayed off. He didn't kind of make a run in behind or get caught offside. He just stayed where he was and used his pace to kind of take one touch, and then the finish was clinical. And that's what he has to do. That's what when you're training with Dan James, you say, this is what you practice, Dan, over and over and over and over again, and get good at this one move. Because if you do, you'll score 5 or 6 goals a season and you'll play a lot more minutes. So credit to him. I think, he looks like a viable option. I think it was good as well that Shoretiri came on for all of 5 minutes. Good to see him kind of get some touches. We know that Amad Diallo is now obviously floating around the squad and he'll play more minutes. And I think these young lads, along with Dan James, they'll get chances because they do offer something a little bit different to what, say, the United starters do on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, great to see Shoretiri get a game. I believe he's from he played in Newcastle Academy, or he's from Newcastle. So it's great for him and his family. So congratulations. He's a real talent. And it's great to see Ollie integrating some of the young lads. But let's talk about the goal that we conceded, Rob. We have to cover this. We have to cover the same old mistakes that we're making. Again, another set piece goal conceded. It's a sequence of errors again, Rob. When I'm looking at it, Maguire's poor header. De Gea should have done better. Nobody closed down St. Maxima. I believe, was it Matic and Martial? I'm not too sure. Maybe in the comments, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong there. But it was terrible, Rob, to be honest with you. I didn't see De Gea as much of a problem, but I'm quite surprised De Gea started and Henderson didn't, if I'm being honest. While I still think De Gea is number one, surely now it's time to give Henderson a go. I think De Gea's form is not good enough at the moment. I think Sky put up a statistic in the last 7 shots or something like that. De Gea's faced, he's conceded like 4 of them or something like that, which is really, really bad. He doesn't look like the De Gea we've seen in his prime. We've got a problem in defence, Rob. I feel like our centre-backs, or generally when we defend set pieces, we lack aggression. Our man marking isn't good enough. We're not aware enough. It's a serious problem. And you're looking at United, they're top scorers in the league, but we're 10th in terms of goals conceded. It's so frustrating. You're looking at it. If Manchester United can sort that problem out, they're challenging. They're at the top of the table. Yeah,
I agree. And it is a problem. But like I keep saying before, there's no real immediate solution. So you have to work with what you got. So I wasn't surprised that Dean Henderson didn't start. Would I start Dean Henderson at the moment? Yes, I would. Why would I start Dean Henderson at the moment? Well, when you look at Dean Henderson's record over a kind of extended period, he's done really well. However, his goals conceded per game per minute is the same as De Gea's. So Ole's not looking at the stats going, there's a statistical change there, and that's what I'm going to act on. It's going to be on gut feeling. It's going to be, all right, is this boy ready? Now, I think he's ready. I think we saw in the Europa League that he commands his area better. He's a confident lad. He wants the chance. He wants to do it. And I think what we saw with De Gea here in the first half was, again, 2 or 3 moments of just pure fluff, of just not doing the job with the ball at feet. I want to say something about David De Gea because I've always been told that he's not very good with his feet. And I go to games. I'm in the ground 2 hours before. I watch every warm-up David De Gea does. And David De Gea is better with his feet than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I've watched him get the ball on the edge of the box and practice before games and ping balls 40 yards into the corners. in the halfway line to do what he will be replicating in a match. He can do it. But the issue with United is that the game's got even shorter. So the game is now him to Lindelof to Maguire, isn't it? And that is a problem because those two centre-backs are slow. And you could see today, and what's happening is that United are now bypassing the back pass. It's not happening anymore. The pass is not going back to De Gea, which is what you would do normally when you're 3-1 up. You go back to your goalkeeper and you play around there. Now, there was a moment in the 89th minute, I don't know if you remember it, and where all our viewers can remember it, where the ball went to De Gea and he passed it to Lindelof, and Lindelof was slightly out of position and it went past him and they got a throw. And that whole minute of kind of play encompassing really what's wrong at Manchester United. And that is that the goalkeeper just hasn't really got the confidence to work with those defenders at the moment. So what do? You can't change the whole back four. That's not an option. Lindelof, as we said, is a preferred option for Ole. So who do you change? And I think ultimately it's going to be David De Gea. And that's because we've got this young lad who is sat on our bench, who's now one of the highest paid goalkeepers in the world. He is. And it's difficult for him to get games and minutes. And eventually he's going to get that chance. And I think when he gets that chance, then he's going to stay there. I think that will be it for De Gea. People say to me, oh, De Gea's on a big wage. You know, who's going to take him? Forget about those things at the moment. It's about winning games. It's always about winning games. And I think if Ole sees that Dean Henderson can come in and reduce that goal ratio, at the moment it's 1 goal a game United are conceded, and that's horrendous. 1 goal a game is not good enough for a team that wants to be in the top 4. It's got to be lower than 1.0. Once you kind of address that and Dean Henderson's the answer, then that's the end of David De Gea, and that's hard. I don't think De Gea will get back in the team if he is dropped. However, of course, Dean Henderson could come in the team, make a rick of it, and two games later, what's happening? We're all banging on the door saying, bring De Gea back. So there's options there, and I think eventually Henderson will be the guy that takes a shirt.
I mean, there's a couple of comments saying the goal wasn't on De Gea. I probably do agree with that.
It wasn't on De Gea. No, it wasn't on De Gea. It's the defensive mindset. It's how they think together.
But Rob, what in your view is a problem? Because I look at it and I think players, yes, they're making mistakes, the same mistakes every single week, but we're not addressing them as well. The coaching staff clearly haven't figured out what the issue is. We're not addressing it on the training ground. At what point do you turn around to the coaching staff and say, this is on you as well? Because you can always, what I don't like to see is when people blame, Maguire will make a mistake, let's say in open play, and people will blame Ole for it. That's just nonsense. But in this situation, the players are making the mistakes, but the coaching staff as well aren't addressing it. And ultimately, United won today. We won 3-1. It was all right. But you look at what happened against Everton, and it's happened in other games where we've made mistakes at set pieces. Ultimately, it's cost us. And we're sitting here now 10 points behind Manchester City. 2 weeks ago, Rob, 5 games ago, we were top of the table.
Well, so, for not accuse the Manchester United coach staff of malpractice, because that's what you just accused them of. You said they're not addressing it. I'm sure they are addressing it. Think about the goal. What happened? It was a set piece. It went wide. It got cold in the box. What happened? The captain didn't head the ball away.
Well, he didn't head it far enough, and no one reacted after that.
That's not a coaching issue. That is an individual error, right? So that is what that comes down to. Now, when you actually look at the ball, when it comes out to Maximin, he gets a shot off. It's not a great shot. Should De Gea save that? Bounced into the ground. He gets time to look at it? Potentially. But I wouldn't blame De Gea. The issue for me there in that moment goes to the captain. He doesn't head the ball away successfully. He's supposed to be one of the best headers of the ball in the country. He came to the football club with a big reputation of having a big noggin and being able to do things with it. And there, he doesn't clear his lines. So because he doesn't clear his lines, it looks like it's a set piece failure, but it's not. It's actually an individual error. It's an easy header. He's just got to get something more on it. And you can't keep giving those goals away. Manchester United's goals come from individual errors. And because they come from individual errors, it's difficult to kind of highlight it as a coaching error. The coaches will be working with these guys night and day, saying, clear your lines, don't go so deep. Those are all things that when a player has the fear, they do it out of reactions. It's not a coaching thing. It's not like I've got to think that I'm pushing up or I've got to clear that ball. Well, you've got to. That's your job. That's football. You don't need to be told that. That's a normal thing you should do. So it's a bad goal to give away. What was good was that it didn't replicate. It didn't kind of. It wasn't like the gust of wind that blew all the cards down and we kind of, United collapsed because of it. Because that's what would have happened over the last 3 or 4 years, is that one big error would have caused another 5 errors and we'd have been sat here talking about, a cacophony of mistakes. But we're not. So I think the defence in the second half dealt with what Newcastle had. Newcastle, not a great attacking team. Almiron's decent. Saint-Maximin's good when he's on the front foot. I think United dealt quite well with Saint-Maximin, and that's why he got pulled in the 75th minute. That was a good sign. It showed that United were doing their job. But I think ultimately, Lindelof, Maguire, De Gea as a trident, as a triangle at the back, it doesn't do it for me. And something has to change. So immediately, we can't buy a centre-back. You can't. Bailly might get minutes. Tuanzebe might get minutes. I think the player that might drop out, if he makes a mistake somewhere down the line, it will be David De Gea.
Where I'll disagree with you is that I'm sure you're not saying this, but correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying. But the issues at the back, obviously, De Gea, Lindelof, Maguire, I think they're all equally the problem. Swapping Henderson in is going to change things, because I still think we've got issues with the centre backs, Rob. I mean, I'm looking at
changes the chemistry. So like when you have a back four work together week after week after week, it doesn't really, you're not looking at the 4 parts being individuals, you're looking at them being one. They're one unit, they're one thing. And the centre-backs you can break down because they're a partnership in the middle of it. Now, you can't magically make these 2 centre-backs quicker. And I think that's why ultimately United will go and buy a centre-back to fix that deficiency. But do you know what you can do is you can get Henderson with Maguire and Lindelof and bash their heads together and say, don't lose the ball. When the ball's on the deck, play 5-yard passes and don't be such a numbskull. And this is what's happening with De Gea, is that he's making mistakes that a 29-year-old goalkeeper, an experienced veteran, shouldn't be making. And it's all about confidence, Haider. So, I still think David De Gea next year still could be one of the best goalkeepers in the world. It might not be at Manchester United. He might be in a Spanish club or somewhere else on a continent. And we'll all be going, wow, De Gea's still got it, because it's about confidence. But I think that when you look at the unit, the back four kind of does pick itself at United generally. The 2 fullbacks generally pick themselves. And we know the captain is the main pick. So your choice is Lindelof, Bailly, or Tuanzebe. Eventually, it might be Mengi as well. Eventually, it might be another centre-back that you buy. But at the moment, you've got to find a chemistry answer for that triangle at the back. And it starts with the goalkeeper and his feet. Henderson's not the greatest with his feet. He's not an Alisson, he's not an Ederson, but he commands his box better. That's both in the air and on the deck. He's just a little bit more confident. His starting position's a little bit more. De Gea starts on his line, whereas you tend to find that Henderson starts on the 6-yard line. That little change, that little thing, I think that would help Manchester United's defence a hell of a lot.
I mean, there's a good point here saying, agree with Rob, if Henderson comes in, he might help with communication.
Did you hear in the last game? Yeah, did you hear in the last game? All I could hear was Henderson going, push up, screaming his lungs out, push up, push up. Now, it's not that De Gea doesn't do that. He does. But you can tell that with Henderson, there's some intent there, because he's confident. He's like, I want to win this game. I want to keep my shirt. Whereas De Gea is the number one who's established. And I think maybe just on the cusp of the turn, like the milk going off in the fridge, when you kind of take it out and give it a sniff and you go, do I put it in my coffee or not? It might still work. I think De Gea is on that end game for Manchester United. I think knowing that he's got someone like Henderson behind him, it's a tough thing. He's not been able to kick on because he's got Henderson there, in the same way that, say, Luke Shaw's kicked on with Tellers at his back.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rob. Looking at United's spine today, David De Gea, Lindelof, Maguire, Matic, Martial. That's not a spine that inspires me with a lot of confidence. And we're going to talk about the man right at the tip of the spine, and that's Anthony Martial. Rob, the most damning thing I can say was it was reported, I believe, by Manchester Evening News. They were saying that Solskjaer was saying to Martial, some movement, Anto, start moving at around the 60th minute. That's damning, Rob. If the manager's telling you that you're the number 9 at one of the biggest clubs in the world to start moving, there's a serious Anthony Martial problem, I think, at the moment. He played in his preferred position. He hardly, for me, pulled up any trees. I don't know if it's lack of confidence. I want to give him the benefit of doubt, Rob. I really do want to give him the benefit of doubt. I don't want to, I don't want to go in on him every single week, but he's making it very, very difficult to defend him. The work rate I felt was down today. Look, creativity was not good enough today as well. So he was feeding off scraps. We've said this before in previous podcasts. But as it stands right now, Mason came on and made more of a difference to Martial, in the minutes that he played. It's a problem, isn't it now, Anthony?
Yeah, and it's also because Mason Greenwood's better than Anthony Martial. It's just as simple as that. He's a better footballer all round. I'm not going to go easy on Anthony Martial. He played as number 9 today. I still say, and I'm not going to move away from this kind of buzz line, he is still the first choice number 9 at Manchester United. He just is. So
I think you're wrong on this one, Rob.
No Cavani today. Okay, so Cavani might be the guy that everyone wants to start, and Cavani's obviously played a lot more minutes than people thought he would. But Anthony Martial was, at the start of the season, the number 9, and that's where you have to view him. So he has to do that job. He has to do the role. He has to get it right. He had no service today. The service wasn't there, which we just highlighted. He kind of played 60, 65 minutes, and the first half United were dire. So there's nothing behind him going on. So that's a tough gig for him. It was in about the 60th minute. He got the ball in the channel, and he broke through. He got past the last defender. And really, with his pace, he just needed to take an extra touch towards the goal, and he's pretty much in for either to slot it in or shoot across the goalkeeper. And he just kind of lashed at it. And that showed me a player who lacks confidence. Yeah, he's just looking for the spectacular in that moment because he doesn't want to take the extra touch. He doesn't want to make the mistake. And then literally 5 minutes later, he was gone. He was pulled out the game. I think for Anthony Martial, he's at the end game as well, like De Gea. I think he's kind of at a crossroads. Now, you said, a dozen or so games ago that, if you can't do it, just sell him. And I kind of snapped back at you and said, you can't really say that at that moment. Yeah. Now, I think 12 games ago, you couldn't say that. You couldn't. We're now 25 games in. It's a different kettle of fish. We're in a different place. And what we've seen is that he's not responded well to the challenger Cavani. Cavani's come in and shown that he's still Cavani. And that's been tough for Martial. But I think what we're going to see now going forward is that can he put up with the challenge of Shortier? Can he put up with the challenge of Diallo? These young lads are going to be training like demons and showing Ole that they're ready and that they want to play, they want minutes. And then Ole's going to have the choice of, right, who is my number 9 for now? Well, is it going to be Cavani? Probably. Or am I going to start playing Greenwood as the number 9? Lo and behold, Mason Greenwood is starting to play as the number 9. So all the clues and everything and the answers are all there in front of us. We don't have to guess any of this stuff. It's all there, Martial's not playing well enough. If he doesn't play well enough going through to the end of the season, then he's in trouble because there's kids waiting to play in that attack. Rashford's going to play. We know this. We know that Bruno's going to play. We know that Cavani, if he stays, is probably going to play or at least get lots of minutes, even that be from the bench or as a starter. Where does Anthony Martial fit in? He is becoming a problem. And I think the way Ole acts, let's think about the Lukaku situation. Romelu Lukaku is a great centre forward. He still is a great centre forward.
I actually wanted to talk about Lukaku, yeah.
We'll talk about Lukaku. And just to kind of conclude the bit about Martial, is that Romelu Lukaku is a great number 9 and can play a certain style and a certain way with a certain manager and a certain formation, and he'll score you tons of goals. However, when he was asked to do certain different things by Ole in that team, he couldn't do it. He was asked to go right to the right-hand side a few games, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't play in that channel, just wasn't in his game. And he was only really happy through the centre. And when he was through the centre, he was just very cumbersome and a bit slow. You could say he was, at that point, he was like the Maguire equivalent, that he just didn't really have the front foot pace, even though he's quick. He's a quick player, but it wasn't working. Martial's the same. Martial is quick, but no movement. That's an issue. So I think that Anthony Martial might well be following Romelu Lukaku out of the football club for the exact same reason that Romelu Lukaku was sold. Not because Romelu Lukaku is a bad footballer, but he doesn't fit Ole's system. And yeah, if Ole's telling him to run in the 60th minute and in the 65th minute he's getting substituted, there's your answer.
Well, it feels like the writing's on the wall a little bit, Rob. It feels like Ole has given him so many opportunities. It's not like Ole sat him on the bench week in, week out. He's played him on the left. He's given him opportunities to play himself into form, Rob. I mean, the biggest sort of indictment I can have against him is that when someone's come in that's challenged his spot, his form has dropped dramatically. It's not just this season with Cavani. It happened with Zlatan. I think the situation was a little bit different with Zlatan, but it still happened for me.
Very different. It's very different.
But even when, I know we've had this discussion before on the podcast. We won't go into it too much, but taking a shirt for me, I thought that was weak mentality from Martial to act like that. I know we have disagreed, and you've said, sometimes these are things are a big deal. He was still young at the time, but you saw with Lukaku as well. Same thing happened, albeit it was under Jose Mourinho. There was some mitigating circumstances there, but Cavani's come in injured for almost 6 months at PSG, 34-year-old, and again his form's dropped. Cavani's showing the way. I'm liking the fact we're seeing Mason play number 9 more. He looks like he's bulked up. I'd like to see him play more with his back to goal. I'd like to see him better holding the ball up, and that will develop with game time. But I do want to talk about Lukaku, because I did tweet out today, and we're seeing a lot of revisionism when it comes to Lukaku. We're seeing a lot of people say, "Oh, well, why did we sell it?" It's not as simple as. It's not as binary as that, your favorite term. For me, when I look at Romelu Lukaku, his time at Manchester United was a difficult time. He obviously bulked up. He wasn't as agile as he was at Everton. I wasn't that impressed with him, even under Jose Mourinho. Scored a decent amount of goals. He's got a good goal record. And we all know Ole played him on the right. He did okay there. But, he left. He's gone to Italy. He's trimmed down. He's playing for a manager that absolutely adores him. He's playing in a league that suits him. He's playing in a system that's pretty much built around him to get the most out of him. And no surprise, he's looking like an absolutely world-class striker. But he didn't fit Manchester United's system. And it's revisionism to turn around and say, oh, well, if Lukaku was playing this Man United team like the way he is right now, suddenly he'd be better than any of our forwards. It's comments like that which just frustrate me, because it's not as simple as 1 + 2 or 1 + 1 = 2. Am I right in thinking that?
No, you're right, but I wouldn't let it bother you. that's my advice to you.
It's more the fact that we're sitting here and we're looking at Martial, and we should be analysing. I'm just saying, generally analysing Martial for Martial. Bringing Lukaku in when he was, I think people forget how poor he was. I mean, usually his first touch was a tackle. When he was here, he was bad. So it's not as simple as to say, oh, well, now that he's playing well here, he would do the same at Manchester United.
Well, look, Romelu Lukaku, when he came to Manchester United, he was bought by Mourinho to be a physical presence up top. So what did he do? He went and put on a load of muscle. Yeah, so he went in the gym, he worked out, he got bigger. The problem then after that is when it all went wrong, and obviously Ole came in and Ole changed the system. Ole wanted to play counter-attack. He wanted to play quick. He wanted to kind of play through the channels a lot more. That Lukaku couldn't respond. And really what Lukaku needed to do at that point was to not go in the gym, lose a little bit of weight, and just kind of get fleet of foot again, which he was once upon a time. He could be a player that ran in a channel because he does have pace and he can do that. But he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do it. And when Ole realized he didn't want to do it, Ole went, bye. That's it. That was the end. So that's good. That's the right way to manage. And I think, when we look at Anthony Martial, I think that he is a confidence player. And I don't want to comment on things like mental health too much because we don't know situations. However, I think what you see with Anthony Martial is that when his form dips, he doesn't dig himself out of a trench. He doesn't kind of get to a point where you think, yeah, he's working hard, he's getting out. What you see is the opposite. The work rate decreases, the quality decreases. His touch gets worse. He doesn't make the channel run. He drops too deep. He's coming even deeper because he wants to get touches of the ball to feel part of the play. Really, what you want to kind of say is you're the number 9. Go up there and do your job on the last man. Run the last man, run the channel, and get United up the pitch a little bit more. But he doesn't do that. So, that's an issue. We can have hypothetical reasons as to why that is, but we have to just call what we see. And what we're seeing at the moment is a striker who did quite well last year, really good numbers, good returns, earned himself the kind of first choice berth as the number 9. And this year has not done nearly as well because the chemistry has changed. Again, I just said there about the back four and the chemistry. Well, Luke Shaw's thrived in a different chemistry, hasn't he? That back four's kind of got going where they're going. But Luke Shaw is now going, do you know what? I'm not staying back here anymore. I'm going to go and play up there, and I'm going to show people what I can do. Anthony Martial, rather than doing that and saying, right, I'm going to go and play in the last man and make that run and score a goal, he's kind of going all over the place. His work rate is not where it was 12 months ago. That's a problem. He's being told that obviously by his coach, because we've all heard it, as you just said there, about the hour mark, and he's being pulled for that reason. Unless he sorts it out, it's not kind of rocket science to say that he won't be at the football club next year when we're looking at these huge jumps that Shortier and like we expect Amid Diallo to do. And then, of course, Manchester United are going to go into the transfer market. United are going to look at it and say, do we need another number 9? Because this guy isn't doing it, and we're going to move him on and out the club like we did with Lukaku. That wasn't a judgment on Lukaku as a player. That was a judgment on what Manchester United needed at that moment of time. And that equation will be used when you say, will Anthony Martial be at Manchester United next season?
Yeah, spot on, Rob. I'm going to bring up a few questions now. Guys, get your questions in. Thank you for all your interactions tonight. It's been brilliant. A bit of a two-parter. So Jazzy's saying here, a chef can't prepare a meal if he isn't provided with the ingredients. Where was the service? This is in reference to Martial tonight. And then another question here. Keep Martial as a squad player.
He won't stay as a squad player.
No. Yeah, agreed.
And you've got to say, who were the squad players? Well, we've just mentioned them, Shortier and Amid. So they're going to be the guys chomping at the bit for the 15-minute roles. You know, Dan James is going to be there chomping at the bit for the 15-minute roles and the rotation. Anthony Martial isn't going to come on after 75 minutes, is he? And think, yeah, I'm dead happy and now I'm going to score a goal. He might score a goal, but you want work rate in those minutes, don't you? You want someone who's going to come on 15 minutes and give you an injection. That's why I said Cavani must be from the bench. Ultimately, not just because he's older, but he comes on and changes games in the 20, 25-minute spell. He gives you lots and lots of energy, lots of kind of upside from the bench. Anthony Martial, for me, is not a good substitute. Doesn't work. He doesn't work on the left as a starter, and he doesn't work as a substitute as a striker.
Rob, an interesting comment here saying, if only Martial works as hard as James Cavani, we won't be so upset with his dry run in front of goal. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's partially fair, because in a game like today where you don't get your shooting boots on and you don't score, you can at least say at the end of it, well, we worked hard. You know, that's what you want. And the thing is, it's the Pogba syndrome. So people would say, you know, when Pogba's form was not as good, the first thing they would highlight is, oh, he didn't run around today. And then you would look at the stats. You could disprove that because he'd quite obviously had run more than most players on the football pitch, but it's a stylistic issue. So you look at Pogba and people say, I didn't see his chest heart bursting out of his chest. Therefore, that was the problem. And it's the same with Martial. He's the same kind of player. That shot I was just talking about in the 60th minute, if that goes in the top corner, again, we're sat here talking and saying, wow, what a finish from Martial. That was fantastic. But I can tell that in that moment, he's not confident, because all he had to do was take an extra touch and he's on the goalkeeper. And Martial from last season then just slots it, passes it in the back of the net, gets you a goal from the right-hand side on his preferred foot. Yeah, I don't know. Like, for me, it's about productivity. And Anthony Martial, I'd say he didn't get any service. That's right. You know, you can highlight that. That is a really important thing. United need to get more creative. But hey, Fred is not going to give you more creativity. Matic is not going to give you more creativity. That's not where you want your creativity from. You want Rashford linking with Martial. You want Dan James linking with Martial. You want Bruno. Bruno in the first half, again, nothing. You know, just didn't do anything. But what happened? He got you in a goal and an assist. So that's his job. He's doing his role. Even when he doesn't play well, he still gets you numbers, and that's what's important.
I mean, you're looking at Bruno's record. That's 40 goals and assists. That's 23 goals and 17 assists in 39 Premier League games. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, it's world-class numbers. I think a lot of the comments, Rob, agree with you. You know, a lot saying Martial would be a terrible squad player. I mean, I kind of look at it as I think about Berbatov as well, and I think about when Tevez left. And Tevez was a fan favorite because he ran around like a headless chicken. I mean, for me at the time, Tevez was my favorite player, you know, in that brilliant 08 team. But you look at Berbatov coming in, and Berbatov had real, like, much more quality than Tevez in terms of, you know, his touch and his ball control. But he didn't run around. But he was lazy. If I'm being completely honest with you, Rob, Berbatov was lazy, and the fans from what I remember, didn't really warm to Berbatov until, sort of the season where he scored. He was top scorer and he scored that hat-trick against Liverpool with that fantastic bicycle kick. But Berbatov, for me, I feel like now when we look back at Berbatov against those rose-tinted glasses, he's looked on much more fondly than he was as a player. But difference between Berbatov and Martial for me is that Berbatov, well, he did it more times than not. I'm not saying Martial hasn't done it. We've seen what he can do, but Berbatov played in title-winning sides, and he played in much better teams. And I just think Martial, the comparison to Berbatov for me is probably a little bit of an insult to Berbatov.
I think that I don't think we can compare them. They're such different players, totally different players. Chalk and cheese. You just cannot compare what Dimitar Berbatov wanted to do on a football pitch to what Anthony Martial wants to do. I think that they both sometimes suffer from a lack of motivation in the moment, and that can show. I think with Dimmy, there is maybe some revisionism there, because now people, I think, remember him fondly, and United were winning titles. So, players that lifted trophies get remembered well. But he was a problem for a long time. And I think if he was around today in this 4-2-3-1, he would be a bit of a nightmare in it, because he wouldn't work in the channel. He'd kind of drop deep. He'd have his shirt out. He'd be on the halfway line having a cigarette, like I used to say, kind of looking around. That's what he used to do. That's how he played. But that was a different team in a different time. Yeah, they're not great comparisons because just of the stylistic issues. I think when you look at players, you have to look at maybe, say, Martial and Rashford. Traditionally wide forwards, and what have they done to kind of enhance their own skill sets, to get themselves on? Now, one is playing in the channel still with Rashford, and the other one wanted to be a number 9. Well, do you know, if you're going to be a number 9, do number 9 things. You've got to make sure that you're working that line. You don't have to be Cavani, because that would be crazy. Cavani's like elite, one of the best working centre forwards in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. So you can't say to Anthony Martial, be him. But what you can say is be more like him. Yeah, just do a little bit more so the fans can see what you're up to, and keep a little bit more of a smile on your face, be a bit more effervescent. Your body language does matter, because it shows the defense whether you're up for it or not. These little things do count, and we need to see a little bit more from Martial. We're getting towards the end of the season, Haider. What was it, 13 games left? He hasn't really got long. He might not start again. He might not actually start a game in the Premier League for the rest of the season if Cavani's fit during that period. And especially if United are chasing, say, second really hard, because that's where they want to finish, I think, now when you look at what Manchester City are doing. And then I think the question will be, who do you buy? I think that they'll buy number 9. I think Haaland...
Well, let's go into it, Rob, because we've got a question here asking us if we could sign one of Haaland and Sancho in the summer. I mean, that's the obvious sort of question, isn't it, really?
Haaland.
Who would you go for?
Haaland.
I said the other day, Sancho over Haaland.
Why?
I think Sancho is more likely.
Why? More likely. Who would be better? That was the question.
So I've looked at it and I've thought it really depends on what you're going to do with Mason. That's the question. I'm seeing Mason play number 9 a little bit more this season. Is Cavani going to get an extra year? If that's the case, if let's say Martial goes, you sign Sancho to go on the right. I know we've got Diallo, but I just think that he's still not there yet, nowhere near there. Whereas Jadon Sancho is, for me, one of the best right wingers around, and I think he's someone that Manchester United desperately need. I would love Haaland, but I feel like you can supplement Mason's development with Cavani for another year. But what you're going to do with I don't think Mason's a winger. I know he's been playing there, but I think he's a number 9. I just think that the balance is much nicer there as well with Sancho, a front three of Rashford, Mason, and Sancho. But I can see exactly for Haaland. I wouldn't be upset if it was Haaland as well. But if you're bringing in Haaland, then you're saying to Mason, right, you're on the right. And I still don't think that fixes the balance problems that we have.
Not necessarily. No, look, football's a squad game. Yeah, it's a squad game. So you need options. People who do different things. If I've got to choose between Haaland and Sancho in this dream scenario, and there's every chance we get neither, the way things stand, I do think that Haaland will end up at Manchester City. It is Haaland all day long, as I think Helen just put up there in the comments. All day long. Manchester United need a striker. They need a number 9. They need someone who gets the ball in the box and puts it in the bottom corner or the top corner every week, and does it with his eyes shut 30 times a season. That's what we need.
Yeah, but we don't create enough as well, Rob. That's another problem.
We don't create enough, but when you've just gone and bought Pellistri and Diallo and you've got Solskjaer coming through, you don't worry about that stuff. You say, right, let's develop. Let's get these guys in and develop them. They might fall short. They might not be ready. But hey, look, Diallo's 18. Yeah, Mason Greenwood was a first teamer at 18. Now, I'm not saying that Mason's better or worse. That's not the question. The question is, can a player give you impact either from the bench or as a starter? I think my dream front four would be Bruno behind, because Bruno's obviously going to play. I think you would play Rashford to the left. You'd play Haaland through the middle. And then on the right, you would pick one of, at the moment, Mason, Ahmed. You could play Solskjaer either as the striker or wide. He's got that option there. And then there's other players in the squad. Dan James we've just talked about. So it's about making the collective stronger. I wouldn't buy Haaland and then go, Mason's never going to be a number 9. That's regressive. That doesn't make sense. He could be a number 9. If he goes and scores more goals than Haaland in training, Ole will be going, maybe Haaland sits on the bench this week and I play my boy who's been with me all this time. It's about competition. This United team have proved that when they've got competition for places, they are a better team. Yeah, so I would say improve the competition. Sancho, for me, great player, great numbers, obviously improved massively in the Bundesliga again this year after having a problem at the start. Yes, he would add something to United. Would he do his defensive duties on that right-hand side? I don't know. That would be something he'd have to learn. He doesn't do that at Dortmund. He's playing more as an out-and-out forward in a kind of 3. And United will play 4-2-3-1 going forward. So I think if you're going to choose a player and you're thinking, right, who is the most important to Manchester United just today as it stands, then it's significantly Haaland, because you need a number 9. Because we're just talking about our number 9 being not very good and might be out of the football club at the end of the season because a 34-year-old's playing better than him. That tells you need a striker, even if Mason Greenwood becomes a number 9.
Who's more likely, Rob? That's the question. We can play fantasy football, but
Sancho's more likely because Sancho is on United's radar and Haaland is on City's radar. But Haaland, like everyone else, he's going to have a release clause, and then it's up for grabs. And there's no doubt that Haaland's people talked to United before he went to Dortmund. He came to Carrington. There's no secret there. His dad was negotiating with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and the big upside, of course, is that the two people with Ole and the player is that they know each other really well from Mulder. So they have a history together. So could Ole convince a kind of hungry number 9 who wants to come to England and be at one of the biggest clubs in the world to prove himself, who's going to play every week? Can he sweet talk him into coming to Manchester United over Manchester City? Yes, I think he could. But you've also got to look at this fact. Sergio Aguero will not be at Manchester City next year. There will be a number 9 shirt waiting there for him. And if he goes to City, he will play. Whether he fits City's system, that's another matter, because City like to play with a more fluid style. Whereas I think a United 4-2-3-1 would suit him quite well. He would run channels. He'd go down the middle. He'd give you all that strength and power. His finishing ability is off the chart. He is going to be this generation's Lewandowski. Yeah. You don't turn down this generation's Lewandowski when you've already got 4 players that can play on the right. So that's the way I look at it.
Putting my neck on the line. For me, I want Sancho. I completely agree with your points. But
so who's your number 9 then next year?
Mason's my number 9.
So
I trust him.
You trust him?
I'll tell you what. I trust Mason more at number 9 than getting in Haaland. And I know Mason will play on the right, but saying, all right, Ahmad, you're ready to play, because we haven't seen anything to suggest that, Rob. At least with Mason, we've seen him play number 9. We've seen him score goals for Manchester United. I still think United have got a creativity problem, which we know, especially on that right. Dan James isn't the long-term starting option. Diallo could be, but Diallo can also play on the left. You know, you've got options then. If you're going to ship Martial out, and then you can wait another year and see, you still got Cavani for another year. I just think that you can bring in the best striker, but let's be honest, most games, they feed on scraps. Yes, we create more. This season, we've created more than we have done last season. But yeah, for me,
do you realize this is not me taking the mick out of you? Do you realize how good Haaland is?
Of course, I realise how good Haaland
So
is.
are we going to miss out on a generational striker because we decide
We're not going to sign him anyway? That's the point.
Well, like I just said there is a chance. There is a chance because he's got release clause and he knows Ole. There is all of that. Yeah, and he has talked to United. But it is a little bit of fancy football, and I would say that United don't need Sancho sing stand. I really don't think they need them. I think if you're looking at the kind of makeup of the squad, United have got options on the right going forward. It's not perfect, of course it's not, but it's not the first position I'm looking at. There is at least 3 positions in this team that are significantly weaker. That means that you don't go and buy a big time £80 million right forward, because I don't think Sancho gets us higher than second at the moment if he was at United. I really don't. I think we're scoring 3 goals a game 16 times. It's showing that United not really got a problem putting the ball in the net. The issue is the rest of the chemistry of the team from back to front. So I would be looking, first of all, bringing your primary striker in, someone who for 10 years is going to score you 20 goals a year with his eyes closed. And I'm telling you, if you can't turn down a player like Haaland, if you had the opportunity over Sancho, you can turn Sancho down because Sancho's not proved in the Premier League anyway. He might come and struggle, might be troublesome for him. Haaland's not proved in the Premier League either, but I tell you what, his style of football suits the English Premier League.
I don't see how
he would love it. He would love it in the Premier League on a 4-2-3-1 with wide players giving him in and someone like Bruno Fernandes behind him playing second man runner. He would love that, and he would score goals for fun. He'd be the anti-Martial. He'd be the opposite of everything anti-Martial is, and he'd be loved. He'd be like a mixture of Ruud van Nistelrooy and Lewandowski, and you can't turn down generational talent if it's what offered to you. You just simply can't. That's how good he is. That's how highly I rate him. I think any team, if City get him next season, City win the title for the next 3 years.
Yeah,
we might as well not bother turning up. Don't bother turning up with your Sanchos and your Greenwoods at number 9. Forget it, because they're going to win the title because they're going to score 150 goals a season and they're going to be laughing at us. So buy him first if you can buy him, because he is that good.
Convince me, Rob. You convinced me. But I think it's probably, for me, it's more of a heart with Sancho, because I love Jadon Sancho. I love the way he plays. I think he'd be a huge success in Man United.
Never pick with your heart. It's a game you play. Game gets played up here. Doesn't get played in there.
I've got a really interesting question, actually, Rob. Do you like the idea of NHL second assists? Matic deserved one for the James goal.
No, I don't care. As long as he does his job in that moment, which he did, it was a good pass across. The assist goes to Bruno because he got a touch. That's it. Who cares?
I think it's quite an interesting thing, because I think assists skew a lot of the stats. You're looking at some of these passes. I mean, you're doing like a 5-yard pass sideways, and then let's say someone scores an absolute top bins, banger, and you're just thinking, well, skews the statistics.
Arguably, you can say that if Bruno doesn't get that touch to Dan James doesn't score because the ball's behind him. So it's an assist. I don't care about those kind of things. All I care about are goals. Assists are good when they make sure that the kind of ball ends up in the net and the goal goes in, and that's what you're happy. That's what you're looking for. But it only really matters to people who play fantasy football. That's all it matters to. There shouldn't be second. Well, I touched the ball 4 times ago, so I get a 4th assist removed. Like what? As long as the ball goes in the net, I don't really care about those kind of stats. Those are not the stats that we talk about on this show much, because they're not really that important. It's more important to talk about the tactical approach and maybe how that made the goal happen.
We've got a comment here from James. I know he absolutely hates stats. Anyone mentions XG, he gets really annoyed. Adding other stats. To be honest, it's what we said last week, Rob. Statistics are important, but when it becomes overly statistical, you're not really analyzing the game, with this source and that source, then that's not the right thing.
Stats do matter in some context, but they must have context. That's what I'm trying to say. So, I think we talk about XG. Everyone's kind of high on talking about XG. They're really excited by it. Nobody wins a game by having a higher XG. If you win the XG battle, it doesn't mean you win the game. Quite often you lose the game because the other team were more effective with a lower XG because they had one shot and scored. So I'm more interested about kind of setup and creativity and how those things affected the game. I was happy that Matic today, got on his motor and ended up in the box, because he's not the player that I really want in and around the box. But twice today, he got up there and it resulted in goals. And that's a huge part of this game, is that, you've got to join in and do things that maybe you're not always happy doing.
I think XG is a great metric, Rob, when you're considering like a full season and you're looking at the XG, because usually rather than game upon game basis. When you're looking at the whole season, you know, it sort of levels its way out as well, and you can see how well a team is performing or underperforming. I think that's when it's most useful. Question here, Rob. Do you think we needed 2 6s versus weaker opponents like Newcastle? Feels like United don't have a 6 that can start himself in the team, which would change the attacking dynamic. To be honest, Rob, we didn't have many options today. No McTominay, no Pogba. I mean, who are you going to play? I don't think it was necessary 2 6s today, because I think
they're not 2 6s.
Misconception that 4-2-3-1 is 2 6s, and it's just not right at all. So
that's not a double pivot. The double pivot isn't that. It's not that inflexible. You know, they're not 2 defensive midfielders, even though essentially Fred and Matic are at the moment. But that's not the kind of opus of Manchester United. That's not what Ole's trying to do. That's not how he's trying to set up. So it might look regressive. And I hear it all the time. Whenever we play a team outside the top 6 or so, people say, why don't you just play with 1 defensive midfielder? Well, there's a reason for that. Because when Man United have played with 1 defensive midfielder in the last 2 years, we've lost games. So it's not that difficult for Ole to do that. You're just essentially allowing one of the pivot to break when you have to. They then turn into a more of a box-to-box entity. But in a defensive shape, it's a kind of 4 and a 2. That's what the pivot does. And then the pivot protects. It stops them players playing between them to get at your 2 very slow centre-backs. We know they're slow. It's an issue. But then it's about going up the other end of the pitch and then having some kind of impact there. That's why Pogba can play the pivot well. That's why McTominay plays the pivot well. And Matic, to his credit, in the second half, not the first, played it well today. You saw Fred even broke away, but Fred has just become a player that just doesn't seem to know what to do in the final third. He's like drowned. He's just like that. He goes up there and he's just drowning, and you just think to yourself, what's the problem, mate? You know, you used to have a little bit more than that. However, I think he's very focused on running around and showing his energy rather than his quality of passing.
It's what I said to my brother today. You know, when people say a player is busy, that basically means their technical abilities is not great. And that's how I look at Fred. I mean, the commentator said tonight, Dan James has been busy tonight. I'm not saying he's got no technical ability, but I'm saying when you call a player busy, and that's how I would describe Fred. He's not very good at passing. His first touch isn't great. He's awful at shooting. He's so bad at shooting. But what he is good at, and what he has got a role in the squad to do, is when you want to press the opposition, when you want someone to go in there and basically front up, you know, he's got good energy as well. He can pick a pass. I'm not saying he can't. We saw his pass for Rashford's goal midweek against Sociedad. But if United really do want to progress, you know, he isn't the long-term option for me.
No, he's not a long-term option. I agree with that.
Brilliant. Rob, let's talk about the final word. I mean, what are your thoughts? Not the greatest performance, but 3 points is the most important thing. Rivals have dropped points, top 4 rivals. Leicester look like they're doing pretty well as well. So we had to win today to get back into second. All in all, frustrating at times tonight, but we won, back to winning ways, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I actually just want to highlight one thing in the comments. Someone's mentioning Rice quite a bit. Rice coming up as a potential player for Manchester United. He is a potential player for Manchester United, but he's going to sign for Chelsea. He's a Chelsea boy, Mason Mount's best friend. He loves Chelsea. He's going to Chelsea. So that's where...
Even now with Frank Lampard not there, and obviously...
Even more so now. You got to remember, Chelsea buy the players themselves, the club, the board. So Tuchel doesn't buy anyone. Tuchel doesn't get a choice. You know, Tuchel's a coach. So I think that's where he'll end up. So that final word, if we win every game with this performance 1-0 every week to the end of the season, 13 games, then we end up pretty close to the title. And that will be a successful season. Haider doesn't like Genus. Yeah.
He's terrible.
He would be a pundit that I could kind of deconstruct in terms of maybe his comments on certain.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he said about Martial? Oh, Martial wants to play on the left, but he can't play on the left because Rashford's there. No, Martial.
Yeah, it was a bad comment because it shows that he doesn't watch Manchester United.
Yeah, that's what I was saying tonight.
Yeah, it's you know, it's pundits. Graham Souness yesterday was saying that that he's seen things where kind of players assaulting other players and referees not seeing it. And all I can remember is Graham Souness assaulting players on the football pitch when I was a kid. So it's kind of crazy that they're kind of highlighting these things. But I digress. Going back to the final word, I just think that Manchester United today, they managed the situation much better than they have in previous games. So in games where we've talked about them not having very good in-game management in the final, say, 30 or 40 minutes, I thought the in-game management today was really, really good. I thought Ole's subs were the right subs. He kind of got the balance right. And United was strolling in that last 20, 15-minute period and could have scored more goals. I think that was the only disappointing thing. But I'm not interested in, if you don't score a fourth, that doesn't matter when you scored three. And this is how United have to be now. They have to be ruthless in these game management moments. They've got 3 really, really tough games coming up now. Chelsea being one of them, Manchester City being another. I can't see United beat Manchester City. They're miles ahead of everyone in terms of their quality. So you've got to go and take 3 points against a Chelsea team who are still, even though been getting results, still not particularly in top gear.
Good
so
defensively, though, Rob, they've conceded two
much
goals
better.
Come in, and like they're definitely more structured from back to front. But they're not.
And you expect that from Tuchel. Yeah. You expect that. But however, draw if you play Manchester United and Manchester United maybe have a good day defensively, then United will be the favourites to win the game on a knockout punch, because United have got the opportunity to get at someone like Rudiger. Rudiger is their centre back now. That's who he's playing. And Rudiger is mobile, but he's also very, very vulnerable in the channels. Who wants to be in the channel? Marcus Rashford. So there are opportunities there for United to go there and get a victory, but they have to now. It's just about winning games. It's not about being pretty. Ugly victories till the end of the season, I'm happy with it. Earlier in the campaign, we're looking for kind of a bit of magic, a bit of flair. Now I'm just looking for 3 points every week.
Could not agree more. Rob, thank you for joining me as usual tonight. And to all listeners, thank you very much for all your comments. Manchester United have won 3-1 tonight, which means we can go into the week positive. Monday morning at work won't look as bad. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.